I count it a high honor to be invited by Dr. Chol Soon-Yim, president of this university, to visit Korea, and in particular, Chung'an University. This is a return visit to those made by Dr. Yim, Dr. Young, and Dr. Wang to Gordon College, and an earlier visit by Dr. Yun Chi Yun. This is my second visit to Korea. My first visit was in the spring of 1953, following the termination of the Korean War. The contrast between Korea of 1953 and Korea of 1975 is great. Then Seoul was devastated. Millions of emigres from North Korea were crowded into Taegu, Busan, and Seoul. The economic conditions were unfavorable, for South Korea lost most of its industry, which was located in the north. I shall never forget the need which I witnessed in those days. Your present prosperity and strength contrast most favorably with the conditions of those days. The United States has a great investment in Korea. The war cost us 138,000 casualties, billions of dollars, and a continued presence in Korea to strengthen your military and armed forces. The interest of the American public is illustrated by a case of 3 intimate friends of mine who have adopted Korean children. Our armed forces have fought in many parts of the world, but they haven't adopted children in any other part except Korea because they love the Korean people. And I myself find that in visiting here, your generosity, your hospitality, your happy and healthy outlook and disposition have won my own heart. And that's exactly what has happened in the whole American people. We also have a very fond feeling for Korea because it is an outpost in what I would call the defense of freedom throughout the world. It's on the forefront of that battle. Your resistance to communist imperialism, your economic resurgence since the war, and your commitment to independence and freedom in Asia have been an example and an inspiration to us. Communism has challenged the world for 56 years. It has divided nations like Germany, China, Vietnam, and also Korea. It has set peoples against peoples ideologically, nations against nations, and individuals against individuals. Intrafratricidal conflict has taken place in many parts of the world due to the fact of the communist ideology. Détente may be spoken of as international diplomacy, but up to the present it has proved to be a one-way street with all the concessions being made by the free world. The dangers inherent in having a communist state on one's borders necessarily influence the processes of free speech and also of free political disagreement and assembly. And this we must be aware of in criticizing any actions by a government that is established nigh unto a communist country. Communism is a counterfeit of Christian social theory. Wherever the true exists, whether in money or character or materials or religion, the counterfeit also exists. In the New Testament, St. Paul said, "Beware of the concision." The concision is merely counterfeit circumcision. And we say, beware of counterfeit social theory. The socialist theory uses the improvement of conditions as a means of enslaving people. It first espouses and champions the oppressed, and then it enslaves those people by the very means which it adopted in supporting the revolution. Communism is a religion. It has its inspired prophets like Marx, Engels, Lenin, Bakunin, and Stalin. It has its authoritative scriptures, such as the Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, the State and Revolution, Leninism, dialectical materialism, and so on. It has its interpretive councils to bring the movement back to the dialectic and authoritative line. It has its dogmas of surplus value, exploitation, class struggle, economic determinism, dictatorship, and state socialism. It has its evangelistic methods in propaganda, preaching, organizational cells, and political action. It has its missionary zeal, its internationalism, and its appeal to the masses. It also demands sacrifice, service, self-denial, martyrdom on the part of its adherents. It devotes all resources to the cause of world revolution in the interest of communism. Communism is a satanic counterfeit of Christian social theory. Its end or its objective is a perfect society of plenty, peace, and prosperity. It declares from each according to its ability and to each according to his need. It advocates a homogeneous society, a classless society, a governmentless society, and an exploitationless society. Christianity's objectives are very similar to these. It speaks of the kingdoms of this world becoming the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ. It prophesies a golden era of plenty, prosperity, and of peace. Now, though communism has adopted these goals, communist nations have resorted to dictatorship, to exploitation, to disenfranchisement, to the use of mass slave labor, to the expropriation of people's property, to starvation and murder to accomplish their ends. These are instruments in the objective of the world revolution in the so-called betterment of the people on the part of the Communist Party. Unfortunately, communism enlists the support of idealists who have not thought through on the subject, of do-gooders who want a socialist society, and of the exploited who exist in every country. Nothing undercuts the communist appeal more than social justice. This leads us to a consideration of the communist theory called the dialectic. Communism is based on what's called historical materialism. Materialism declares that there's only one substance in the world, that mind is the functioning of a physical brain, that soul is the functioning of a physical body, that God is a name for the social process. Therefore, historically, the economic conditions determine what a man thinks, what the forms of society are to do, what a man does, and what a man is. This is called historical materialism or historical determinism. The theory states that history is the story of class conflicts and class antagonisms due to economic conditions. The classes, we're told, are always in conflict. The plebe and the lord originally, then the serf and the master, then the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, and that the masses of the people are in a condition of exploitation by those who are the ruling class, and thus there is a class conflict that constantly exists. The conflict is always used in what's called Hegelian language, namely that of thesis, then antithesis, and then synthesis. And we're told that as this moves on in the dialectic or the development, that the ultimate victory and the ultimate conquest shall be given over to the communist movement, which will be the final form of society. Communism believes that the capitalistic system exploits the surplus value of labor, which is the difference between what a worker is paid for his labor and what its real value is. They say that this surplus value is kept back by the employer and goes into the profits of capital. Capitals then compete one with another in the exploitation of surplus value of labor power. Thus, the surplus value is gathered into the hands of a few, leading to monopoly. Competition causes small capitalists to fail. The spoils again go to the few. The concentration of capital and the means of production in the hands of a few men bring this into what we call cartels or great capitalistic movements. The process is marked by crises. These crises are involved in the circulation process of capitalism, where profits are appropriated for the system. But the source of additional capital is not in the circulating process, it's in the production process. The realization of it comes in the circulation process. Each capitalist must compete with another capitalist to get more capital. This he does by reducing the cost of labor and by heightening the productivity of labor through the use of machinery. When overproduction ensues, the attendant crisis results in misery to labor. To prevent this, the workers should unite for protection in free associations which take upon them political character and then become very important in the class struggle of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie for the ownership of the means of production. The last stage in this struggle is the seizure by the proletariat of the means of production and the liquidation of the capitalistic class. This may come by force or by franchise, by revolution or by legislation. The suffering involved in the revolution is justified by the thought that it is less in the long run than the workers' suffering entailed in the capitalistic system. The proletariat then establishes the dictatorship which keeps the power in the hands of the Communist Party and begins to build state socialism. This is the first step toward ultimate communism, or the governmentless society. But communism cannot be established, we're told by Marxism, for 500 years. Once an individual is convinced of this dialectic, then, though he may be an intellectual or though he may come from one of the higher classes, he is destined to cast in his lot with the revolution. Now, the strategy of the movement is to use the communist parties of the various nations as the vanguard of the revolution. Once the Communist Party has succeeded in launching a revolution, the Red Armies of other nations will assist, bringing about the establishment of the communist state. The ultimate goal is world revolution in the establishment of a homogeneous society. This will take place as the revolutions in successive states occur, initiated by the Communist Party and supported by the world communist movement for the purpose of ultimately bringing about a majority of communist states and thus bringing about the world revolution. Ideally, this society would then liquidate all war, illiteracy, oppression, exploitation, ignorance, and suffering, and the world would be a communist utopia. You can see how intellectually this could appeal unto certain people. The Christian social view is founded upon the belief in God, upon divine moral law, and upon the infinite value of man before God according to that law. Herbert Butterfield in Christian Civilization, John Bailey in What is Christian History, and Arnold Toynbee all reveal that this is the ground of what we call Western culture. The practice of this theory supports a free society in which free men may exercise themselves with freedom of speech, freedom of possessions, freedom of enterprise, freedom of worship, freedom of press, freedom of ballot, and a free society. This view has released the ingenuity and the creativity exhibited in the free world. The only basis for such a free world is the biblical presupposition involved in the faith in God, moral law, and man created in the image of God. The Christian declares that man is off-center, he's fallen, he is perverted morally. He is redeemable through faith in and commitment to Jesus Christ as Savior, which results in his regeneration and his social concern. But unregenerate man needs the restraints of government to superintend his activities and to protect all men so that the individual does not infringe upon the rights of others. These two views have been in tremendous conflict throughout the world for the last half-century. The great upheavals that have taken place in Eastern Europe, in Southeastern Europe, in Southeastern Asia, in Africa, Latin America, are all related to this primary problem. It's very much like squeezing a balloon. You squeeze it in one place and it bursts out in another. You squeeze it there and it bursts out in another. All of these problems are related to this great struggle that's taking place ideologically in the world. In the West, we have the movement which has repudiated Christian foundations, but which has attempted to promote the practical effects of Christian philosophy. It has emphasized a program of social justice by means of labor laws, old age assistance, medical care, unemployment insurance, public education, public housing, relief for the poor, and welfare, which we call the welfare state. But in denying the Christian presuppositions, it is played into the hands of the socialists and also of the communists. It is essential to recognize that Christian social action cannot be disassociated from or separated from its Christian presuppositions. Otherwise, the premises of communism have been admitted. And once we admit or grant the premises of communism, we must resort to legislation and then control from above in order to change society and to bring about the utopian goals. The greatest bulwarks against the advance of communism is the commitment unto Christian civilization and Christian presuppositions. This university was founded upon those presuppositions, and I plead for a recognition of them. Two great philosophies are in conflict in the world today. The one is expressed by the communist nations, which now control 1/3 of the people of the world, and which are attempting to advance their cause by military action and by subversion in many areas. The other is represented by the free nations, who emphasize biblical theism as a philosophy, the release of the ingenuity of men by creating freedom of thought and action, and the creation of prosperity by releasing resourcefulness and ingenuity of the individual human person. The outcome of this struggle will depend upon the firmness of our commitment to an understanding of the philosophy of the communist movement, as opposed to Christian theism, upon a commitment to a firm resistance against the extension of communism in any part of the world, and upon an establishment of righteousness and justice for the masses of men who long to enjoy the fruits of technological discovery in a free society. I believe that Korea has played an important part in showing the way of freedom and of prosperity. We honor it for taking its place in the vanguard of freedom and thus fulfilling its destiny in the struggle in the free world. Thank you very much.